Qatar is calling on the Taliban to cooperate in the fight against terrorism. Foreign Minister Sheikh Mohammed bin Abdulrahman Thani was speaking after talks with his German counterpart in Doha.
Qatar is fully prepared to provide maximum support to maintain stability in Afghanistan and also provide the prospects for the protection and preservation of the Afghan people's rights. We discussed the means to avert any possible human catastrophes, including the delivery of necessary aid. We also discussed the means to combat terrorism, especially since Afghanistan is at a turning point in its history. We reiterated that the Taliban should demonstrate full cooperation and to honor all the obligations placed on their shoulders in this context.
Personally, I believe talks should continue with the Taliban. On the one hand, we should seek solutions to this very critical issue, like the full operation of the airport. On the other hand, any instability within Afghanistan will undermine our ability to combat terrorism in the region. We should convey our expectations to the Taliban. They should be judged not by their words, but by their actions.
Jamal Shail has been covering for us all that diplomatic activity and talks going on in Doha. Joins us now live. Jamal, the bottom line, I think the message coming through from those foreign ministers is, for now, the Taliban is under observation, right?
Indeed, the observation, engage, not necessarily acknowledge, or at least not necessarily put them on par as a government. They don't want to isolate the movement, but they want to continue having a discussion with them in the hope, they say, that this will confidence build and also gear the new rulers of Afghanistan towards what the international community sees as benchmarks and standards, namely things like inclusive governments, women's rights, and so forth. Obviously, that's the international community's perspective on things. As far as the Taliban is concerned, it comes from legitimacy and its ability to drive out foreign occupiers, and that's what's brought it to power. Qatar obviously has been key in the past couple of weeks, if not actually couple of years, when it comes to Afghanistan, either through the intra-Afghan negotiations and talks, or by being able to walk that fine line of diplomacy, bringing in the Taliban to discuss peace terms with the US and that withdrawal. The past few weeks has seen Doha focus on the evacuation elements of it. What we've seen today, Sami, is a shift from the evacuation kind of side of things towards now moving forward from a political solution perspective, throwing towards the governance issue, throwing towards international relations and how to engage with the Taliban in order to ensure that the needs of Afghans are met, either those needs through humanitarian aid, which, as was pointed by the foreign ministers, is going to increase as wintertime approaches in Afghanistan, or through free movement of people with the need to have some sort of authorities running the Kabul international airports, and that is something that the foreign minister spoke about there. So there is discussions with the Taliban. There is what they've said, they are engaging with the Taliban, but not necessarily yet fully recognizing them in terms of a government.
Jamal, I'm glad you mentioned the airport. Doha has played an important role not only as a hub for all of this diplomacy, but there is some suggestion that Qatar may also be helping to get that airport up and running. How should we read the very cautious line taken by the Qatari foreign minister on that issue?
Well, it's still a proposal, one that we've heard about that from some sources, that it's Qatar and its close ally Turkey, who obviously had its military as part of the NATO presence in Afghanistan, would be seen as a good choice to run that airport. The reason why they would see that, because they enjoy good relations with the Taliban on the ground, and obviously they are recognized states, either a member of NATO or partners of NATO, as Qatar is today, and therefore that is something that would appease, let's say, everybody and assure people in terms of security, in terms of when you're looking at things like goods trade and money going in and out of the airport. But it appears that this is not a done deal. This is still just a suggestion. Whether the Qataris want to do this, whether they have the capacity to do this, is still we'll wait and see, and whether the Taliban will be willing to. What we've seen and we've heard from from our colleagues on the ground in Afghanistan who've been interviewing senior Taliban officials, they keep stressing that they want to explore the possibility of their own assets doing things in terms of Afghan assets, that they want to show this as a sign of self-determination, that now that they have their independence and have managed to expel the foreign invaders of these, as they've described it, they want to look at that as a choice. But obviously, whether they have the know-how to do that or the resources to do that, we'll wait and see. And if they don't, then they will probably end up relying on one of those countries that they have warm relationships with, and Qatar obviously being one of the main ones there.
All right, thanks so much, Jamal Al-Shayal. Qatar has been working to end that war in Afghanistan for a decade. The Gulf nation, home to the largest US base in the Middle East with nearly 10,000 troops. In 2011, it began hosting Taliban leaders who were released from Guantanamo Bay. They laid the groundwork for talks with the Afghan government. At the request of the US, a Taliban political office was opened in Doha in 2013. Well, 5 years later, the US and Taliban began direct talks, leading to last year's agreement. Senior US military officials began holding face-to-face talks in Doha. When the evacuations began in Kabul, the American base at Al Udeid in Qatar suddenly became the hub for tens of thousands of people leaving Afghanistan. 40% of all evacuees passed through it. And Qatar is now hosting temporary embassies for the US and UK, who've moved their diplomatic missions for Afghanistan to Doha. All right, let's talk now to Al Jazeera's senior political analyst, Marwan Bishara. He joins us via Skype from Paris. Listening to the statements coming from the foreign ministers of Qatar, of Germany, and indeed from US officials, is it fair to say, Marwan, a consensus is emerging here? It's coming together on how to engage and deal with the Taliban going forward.
Yes, my reading is that there is a roadmap of sort is emerging to mitigate the crisis in the post-war era in order to stabilize Afghanistan and to prevent the emergence of any political strategic military void or the emergence of extremist terrorist groups. And that clearly the roadmap has a number of signposts, and those are quite chronological. So you have to do the humanitarian, the airport, you have to form an inclusive government in order for the Taliban then to be able to ask for foreign aid or recognition of its government. And I think the emergence of such roadmap is, of course, indispensable for the international community to be able to deal with the Taliban. And here, I think the question of the airport, Sami, is critical, not because it's just an airport, but because it's a microcosm of where things were and where things could be. And like the Qatari foreign minister says, one thing is to secure the parameters of the airport, a whole other thing to run the airport, to manage the security and the safety of traveling, because no country around the world is going to simply send its commercial flights in and out of Kabul if there is no international oversight at this point in time. And the volunteering of the likes of the Qataris and the Turks and so on and so forth will probably be very helpful in beginning to implement such a roadmap.
Marwan, how long do they have? I mean, it seems when you listen to the statements by the German and Qatari foreign ministers, they were talking, particularly the German foreign minister, talking about, we need to see and judge the Taliban by actions rather than words. We want to see their policies towards an inclusive government, towards how they treat women and so on. But this is a country which is going to, if not already, facing a cash crunch. I mean, they need money soon to start paying people to do the mundane tasks of running a state, right?
Absolutely, and I think the thing is that the Germans and the Americans and the British and so on, they know that the Taliban knows that too. Because one thing is to be a counterinsurgency and to be destroying things that the Americans are trying to build. A whole other thing is to govern and build things. Running the sewers in a country is not exactly a fabulous job. It needs to be done. Paying the salaries of thousands upon thousands of administrative and the soldiers and so on and so forth will have to be done. That requires money, it requires cash, it requires foreign currency, and so on and so forth. So the Taliban also understand that it needs all of that, and hence, what you expect moving forward is what we've heard in the press conference, which is engagement. Now, what's the difference between engagement and just talking? Well, I think for a long time, people have been talking at the Taliban. I think what we're hearing today and we've been hearing recently is more talking to the Taliban. The difference between talking at and talking to is one is lecturing and not listening, and the other is engaging. Engaging meaning you recognize that there is a new government, that the Taliban after 20 years have basically won the war, and that they are now the de facto government in Afghanistan, and you have to deal with them. And so to talk to them is to engage with them, and that means to be pragmatic about that way forward, which means that both the Taliban and its international interlocutors, through the Doha hubs and its like, would probably be quite attentive into both the urgency in Afghanistan and the needs of the international community to make sure that things go according to the roadmap. And the roadmap, once again, is in that sense quite important, quite strategic to move forward. The quicker the Taliban and the international community get on the road, the quicker we can go through the signposts and the quicker we could stabilize Afghanistan.
All right. Thanks so much. Marwan Bishara.